Good morning to you, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. Alan Clements here from Haiku on the island of Maui, United States of America, July 11th, 2021. Today is my last day in this particular location. I'm moving into a place that's been given to me closer to town where I can walk more. Blessed to be in this sacred tropical jungle with some beloved friends, brilliant scientists and artists, a real collective of radical intelligence and beautiful energy. It's been a true gift to be here. I won't get too much into the details, although I would love to do it, perhaps tomorrow or the next day. But today is a remarkably important day, I think, for all of us in the world. Is the 26th anniversary of Srebrenica in Bosnia-Herzegovina, the former Yugoslavia. 26 years ago is when 8,000 Muslim men and boys were separated from the women, where they were being held by the Dutch peacekeeping forces in a soccer stadium for fear of massacre. And Bosnian Serb soldiers, in a short rendition of a horror, systematically massacred the men and the boys. Many women escaped, many didn't, many were raped, many were murdered. A terrible blight on the conscience of the planet. At a moment where honesty and, I would say, ethical courage are radically important. And in this short talk, this short sharing, I would like to honor the men and the boys and the women of Srebrenica. I would like to honor all the people in the former Yugoslavia that died, that were killed, that were massacred, that were raped. Not a very easy topic. Lest we forget about who we are as human beings interacting with each other based upon our own unrecognized fear, greed, delusions. We live in the memory, in the ability, in the courage, in the challenge of memory to reflect upon behaviors, patterns of speech, ways in which we did not restrain impulsions to desecrate, denigrate, and in this case, to massacre and to commit genocide. A moment in history where we can reflect and do all that we can, not only to not forget, but I want to explore what could be remembered, what should be remembered, to potentially avert our own collusion with violence, with war, with ethnic cleansing, with crimes against the environment and nature and humanity, and of course with genocide. I think it was Elie Wiesel, the Nobel laureate from Israel, who lived through the Holocaust, if I'm not mistaken, a survivor of the death camps of Auschwitz. Denial is a second murder, a second genocide. First is the horrible massacre of human life, and denial amplifies that into what he proposed as a second genocide. And it's very interesting to me to awaken more intimately to the nature of nature, to the nature of consciousness. My place embedded in this eco-cognitive sphere, inheriting proclivities and conditions that, if unmindful, and even with mindfulness, we can justify behaviors that persecute, discriminate, and murder and massacre right now. If we were just to simply reflect in less than a minute, the wars, the genocides, the murders in the name of the evolution of the human species. Our behavior, with all of its radical, scientific, creative, political, educational visions, equally, to state the obvious, it's unthinkable the amount of suffering and tears and blood that we have enacted upon each other, on generations, on the environment. And here we sit today in our own respective way, not only trying to make sense of our lives in context with life, but to hopefully participate in the evolution, I want to say of consciousness, but the evolution of conscience and the fidelity of knowing what to restrain from and what to engage, the fidelity of knowing what to restrain and what to engage, whether it be through thought, speech, or actions, in the intersection of action, speech, and thought. What to restrain, what to engage, what to sanctify, and what to challenge in ourselves. The deep spiritual quest to study our own consciousness in relationship to context and make good in our own humble way in a lifetime, on the promise of protecting the sanctity of life and other, and creating conditions for optimal peace and unity and harmony, if you will, for the life that's too young to fend for itself, and the life not yet born, the evolution of life on our precious planet. And having a daughter, 14 and a half, having been in Bosnia and in Croatia during the final year of their wars, having been out to Srebrenica shortly thereafter the massacre, having been to that soccer stadium, having driven on that rambling country road where the men and the boys were separated from the Bosnian Muslim women and children and systematically massacred by Bosnian Serb forces. I remember going with my friend Marcia Jacobs, who worked at that time for the United Nations Refugee Resettlement Program, and she and I drove out there, and kilometer after kilometer you could see, and we stopped and looked at buildings riddled with bullet holes where the men and the boys were placed to be systematically assassinated. And then you could see in areas where the United Nations were attempting to exhume the mass graves, to identify and to place names upon the men and the boys, and in some cases the women and the young girls as well, and to create a condition for grieving and mourning by identifying a decomposing corpse and identifying that corpse as my husband, my son, my father. Such a big part of my heart wishes, against all odds, that there was a molecule, a set of conditions that could simply be ingested, inhaled. And as a result of that deep inhalation, of the reconciliation of the toxicity of greed, fear, and delusion, it would relax those proclivities that seem to be embedded in the cognitive soil of consciousness and root down into what's been known as the subconscious and the substratum and the collective unconscious, the infinite derangement of conditions and currents swirling and mixing with greed, fear, delusion, projection, blame, the desire to obliterate, massacre, kill all forms of consciousness in dynamic, diluted action that desecrates by function, that denigrates by condition. Into the annals of infinite history we write, in the blood of the forgotten, a massacre in Denver, a genocide in Rwanda, an ethnic cleansing in the Karen state of Myanmar, and the same in the Rakhine state with the Rohingya. And on and on and on, over and over, boys and girls, men and women, you and me, our family of historians that make good on the promise of reflecting on history, trying never to forget. But what should we remember in the face of the 26th anniversary, an anniversary of Srebrenica's massacre, a blight on the conscience of humankind? When will we ever satisfy our need to stop violating each other in the name of anything? Why is it so difficult? Why is it so difficult? Why are we so programmed to find difficulty in ceasing violence, rape, war? Why? Yes, there's been studies throughout history, experimentations biblically, spiritually, meditatively, through the molecules of the psychedelic, whether it be the mushrooms, the psilocybin, the more organic forms of the DMT, the MEO, the UFO meditator. I mean, where are we in this universe? Why haven't we resolved the riddled puzzle of knowing how to sanctify our interiors and to cease our participation in collusion with violence, war, denigration? Why is that such a complicated dream, right? When will we find enough fire in our belly, to use a phrase by Robert Bly, to scream so loudly, to meditate so fully, to creatively evolve something within the genome of totality that plants itself in the mind of a human being, in the body of an animal, in the genes and the cells of trees and birds and waters? Why is there violence, right? Why violence? More important, as I close today in this little bit of a scream, rant, hope of hymn, of peace, are you Alan? Are you Carol? Are you Martina? Are you Janine? Are you Marsha? Are you Robin? Are you Michelle? Are you Joseph? Are you Jack? Are you Noah, Joah, Bella? What are you doing in the name of your life? Are we participating in the evolution of consciousness to tease out of this ego-cognitive system of conditions fear, greed, anger, and denial? Denial. The inability of the human psyche to face a situation and look at it with a desire to patiently learn from it. Therefore, we pull down the shade and we go into denial and project either outside or inside things that deflect us from the truth of something. The truth of something. What could we learn? What will we learn? How can we digest and integrate the evolutional wisdom of what we learned from the Holocaust? from the genocides in Burma, in Africa, in America, in Canada. Why so much killing? I can't propose answers today, but I will end today with a prayer, a hope, a dream. I long in my heart for those men and women dedicated, purposely dedicated to the opposite of forever wars, forever peace, forever unity, dedicating their political, social, psychological, spiritual, religious lives to the absolute absence of doing whatever is necessary to restrain from greed, fear, delusion, collusion with violence. Do all that we can within the field of mindful intelligence, compassionate intelligence, emotional intelligence. Commit our lives to the actions of nonviolence. Using the power of speech to heal, not divide. Using the power of our words to unify, not separate. To bring people closer who are enemies in heartfulness, to dance rather than to fight. How well do we live to keep peace and unity and harmony alive? Freedom of thought, freedom of speech, the absence of fear, and the overcoming of delusion and righteousness. I'll close here with my time with Aung San Suu Kyi, who cannot speak for herself. My teacher, her teacher, the late Venerable Sayadaw U Pandita, coined a phrase and illuminated in our book of conversations together that he titled Wisdom for the World, mindful advice to the people of my country of Myanmar, the Dhamma of reconciliation as the cognitive transformational energy to confront fear, greed, righteousness, delusion, violence, genocide, ethnic cleansing, and crimes against humanity. How to heal. Do all that you can, Aung San Suu Kyi told me. Do all that you can, Alan, Sayadaw U Pandita told me. To do everything humanly possible in your lifetime to overcome your own unrecognized fear and ignorance, greed, your proclivity to violate yourself and others. Commit yourself to absolute restraint, the courage to ethically restrain the edge in speech, thought, and action, and encourage yourself to elevate through speech and thought and action the power of love, kindness, and what he called the high Dhamma art of reconciliation, and the conditions for that: non-vilification, non-demonization. The power of speech to heal and the wisdom of our emotionality to transform our interiors. Pray as much as possible to overcome our own accumulative feelings of greed and anger and delusion. And I pray that we can stop the history of blood in the name of 26 years ago in Srebrenica, looking into those mass graves. The stench was overwhelming. The fear was overwhelming. The idea of what happened there just months before, overwhelming. And may I close today with a simple prayer. May we all take a moment to remember Srebrenica, to remember all the blood and the fear and the anger and the righteousness through all genocides, all massacres. May we commit ourselves here on July 11th, 2021, to a life of unity, harmony, and peace, the overcoming of our own collusion with violence, and practice the high art of the Dhamma, of reconciliation, commit ourselves to bringing each other together, doing all that we possibly can to elevate the status of the good, the true, and the beautiful, and do all that we can to cease our proclivities to denigrate or to vilify or to divide. So from my heart to yours, thank you for being in my life. I'll see you tomorrow from another location, and have a great day. And let's remember the people of Bosnia, and specifically of Srebrenica. Thank you.